Ghostricks are a fan favorite archetype in Yu-Gi-Oh!, based around a group of adorable Halloween fiends who like to scare other monsters into hiding. Unfortunately, they never really took off with competitive players despite having a bit of a cult following. And today we're going to take a look at why these face-down focused monsters failed to flip the script. The Ghostrick monsters are a defensive archetype based around flipping monsters face down and face up again. This has a few benefits, mainly that very few forms of protection can stop a monster from being flipped face down. And when a monster is flipped face down, it loses most of its inherent protection. So if you manage to use the effect of Ghostrick Jack Frost to turn an opponent's big, bad boss monster face down, you can then use the effect of a card like Ghostrick Alucard to target the monster and destroy it, even if that card normally has targeting protection. Not to mention that, besides for fusion summoning, any monster that's face down can't be used for extra deck plays. So this can stop some combos from working properly as well. However, it also has a lot of downsides. For one, this is almost always an impermanent form of removal, as your opponent can just flip their monsters face up next turn and attack again. However, this isn't the biggest limitations of Ghostricks. By far, the biggest weakness of the monsters is that none of them can be normal summoned unless you already have a Ghostrick monster on board. For some archetypes, this may not be a big deal, but Ghostricks don't have that many ways to special summon themselves out, as we'll soon see. That's enough talking about the abstract though. We need to take a look at what these cards actually do to really understand how this deck works. Weirdly enough, we need to start with the archetype's various field spells to understand how this deck works. To start, Ghostrick Parade has the effect where face-down monsters can't be targeted for attacks, but they don't stop players from attacking directly. Your opponent takes no damage, and whenever you've attacked directly, you can add a Ghostrick card from deck to hand. Ghostrick Museum makes it so that you can only attack with Ghostrick monsters. It has the same face-down monsters battle protection as Parade, and at the end of the damage step, you can flip any monster that inflicted battle damage face down. Finally, you have Ghostrick Mansion, which has the same face-down battle protection effect, and it has the effect where all effect damage and battle damage inflicted by non-Ghostrick monsters is halved. As you can see, the ability to protect your face-down monsters from battle is very important to the deck, which is why just about everything in this archetype involves face-down monsters. However, locking your opponent out of attacking at all would be really strong. So all of these field spells also let your opponent just attack directly. This is kind of an issue, as it means while your opponent isn't converting the battle phase into removal, they are just kind of winning the game with battle damage. Of the Ghostrick's many strengths, inflicting damage to your opponent fast is not one of them. The deck has a lot of ways to stop battle to help make up for this, as we'll see in just a second. And Parade's ability to get you tons of cards if your opponent swings into it does help you take over the game if your opponent is attacking with too many individual monsters. But the threat of taking tons of battle damage is huge. That's probably why Mansion halves all the damage you take. So that way, you're more likely to have a few extra turns to try and get back into the game. It's worth keeping this weakness in mind when looking at the deck's monsters though. The Ghostrick main deck monsters can all be split into 3 groups. Level 1 Fiends, Level 2 Spellcasters, and Level 3 Zombies. They each have some common themes amongst the levels as well. The Level 1 monsters start with Ghostrick Lantern, which has 800 attack and 0 defense. It can't be normal summoned unless you have a Ghostrick monster out, like I said. And it also has the effect where, once per turn, you can flip it back face down. This ability to reset themselves face down is an effect that all of the Ghostricks share as well. Finally, it has the unique effect where if your opponent targets a Ghostrick monster you control for an attack, or tries to attack directly, you can negate the attack and special summon it from your hand in face down defense position. And this isn't a hard once per turn. Similar to Lantern is Ghostrick Jack Frost, which has 800 attack and 100 defense, and the same first 2 effects, as well as an effect where if you're attacked directly, you can flip that monster face down, and if you do, special summon this card from your hand. Ghostrick Spectre has 600 attack, and on top of the normal effects of your Ghostrick monsters, if one of your Ghostrick monsters is destroyed by an attack or a card effect, you can special summon Spectre from your hand face down and draw 1 card. And finally, there's Ghostrick Mary, which has 100 attack and 1600 defense. It is the effect where, if you take damage, you can discard this card to special summon a Ghostrick monster from your deck face down that has an attack less than the damage you took. As you can see, all of these level 1 monsters have ways of special summoning either themselves or your other Ghostrick monsters. And this is how you get around that pesky little no normal summoning restriction. However, this is where we start to see one of the biggest weaknesses of the deck, which is how difficult it can be to actually start making plays. All of your level 1 monsters require your opponent's cooperation to special summon a monster, which means that your turn 1 plays are practically non-existent. This is really bad. because it basically puts the ball in your opponent's court from the start of the game. Nowadays, your opponent will just make a negate of some kind before they even go to the battle phase, so your battle-focused hand traps aren't going to be doing anything. However, power creep alone isn't the reason Ghostricks failed, nor was the introduction of link monsters which can't be flipped face down, and therefore really mess with the deck's main gimmick. The thing is, even far before negates and like were common, the deck was just far too slow. Even back then, decks had tons of free special summons, like Evil Swarm Mandragora, and they had ways of removing back row, which, as we'll soon see, the deck relies on heavily. This may not be the biggest deal on its own, but the rest of the archetype isn't anything special. There are a few categories that the rest of the Ghostricks can be split into. The level 2 and 3 monsters are either interactions, win conditions, or searchers. For example, Ghostrick Nekomusume has the effect where if a level 4 or higher monster is summoned while you have another Ghostrick monster face up on your field, you can flip that card face down. And Ghostrick Yugioh has the effect where if it's destroyed by battle, you can turn that monster that destroyed it face down, and it can't change its battle position. The deck also has searchers like Ghostrick Doll and Ghostrick Stein. Stein being able to add a Ghostrick spell or trap from your deck to your hand on a hard once per turn. Doll has a bit of a long effect, but during the end phase of the turn that it's flipped face up, you flip all monsters face down. Then you can summon a Ghostrick monster from deck whose level is equal to or lower the number of cards you flip face down with this effect. Finally, you have your win conditions. Cards like Ghostrick Warwolf, which deals 100 damage for each set card in the field when it's flipped face up, and Ghostrick Skeleton, which banishes cards to the top of your opponent's deck face down when flipped face up, equal to the number of Ghostrick monsters you control. Remember, these cards can flip themselves face down, so you can use these flip effects over and over. Between these cards and cards like Ghostrick Jiangshi, one of the deck's best searchers, it did have more than enough playable monsters to form a coherent deck. The issue is that these monsters aren't good enough to make up for their inherent downsides, at least not on their own. The deck was released in the Xyz era, so it had a suite of useful Xyz monsters it could summon, starting with the Ghostrick Dullahan. This is a rank 1 monster that requires any 2 level 1s to make. It has 1000 attack, and an effect where it gains 200 attack for each face-up Ghostrick card you control. You can also detach an Xyz to target a face-up monster on the field and have its attack for the turn on a quick effect. Also, when it's sent to the grave, you can target another Ghostrick card in your graveyard and add it to your hand. The rank 2 is Ghostrick Succubus, which requires any level 2 monsters and has 1400 attack and 1200 defense. While you have another Ghostrick monster, your opponent can't target it for attacks. Once per turn, you can detach a material to target a face-up monster on the field with an attack less than the combined attack of all your Ghostrick monsters and destroy it. And while you have a face-up Ghostrick monster, your opponent can't use that monster zone. The rank 3 is Ghostrick Alucard that requires 2 level 3 monsters and has 1800 attack and 1600 defense. Your opponent can't target any of your Ghostrick monsters or face down defense position monsters for attacks except for Alucard. On a hard once per turn, they can detach a material to target one set card on the field and destroy it. It also has the same floating effect as Dullahan. And finally, we have Ghostrick Angel of Mischief, which released a bit later than the rest of the archetype, but not long enough after them for us to count it as later support. This Xyz monster has 2000 attack and 2500 defense, and requires 82 level 4 monsters to make. But it can also rank up on top of any Ghostrick Xyz monster, taking all of its materials, because there were no level 4 Ghostrick monsters at this time. When the number of materials on the card becomes 10, you win the duel. And once per turn, you can detach material to add a Ghostrick spell or trap from your deck to your hand. You can also attach a Ghostrick card from your hand to it as a material once per turn. Overall, these are a really solid line of Xyz monsters, especially for the time. Succubus is a bit of a letdown, as leaving your monsters face up to maintain the lock can be a bit difficult when the deck's playstyle being about flipping cards face down. But it is removal in the extra deck, so you can't be upset about it. Alucard and Dullahan are also strong removal, but their extra floating effects make them even better, as it's very difficult for your opponent to stop you from going at least card neutral when you summon them. Angel of Mischief is a great consistency card, allowing you to pivot any XC play into whatever you need from your deck. The alternative win condition of the card is a bit of a gimmick, but being able to search any archetype card from your deck on a soft once per turn allows for Angel to help facilitate the deck's most powerful plays. Outside of these cards, the deck also had a ton of trap cards. Ghostrick Scare, Ghostrick Go Round, Ghostrick Vanish, all allowing you to flip monsters up and down or protect your board in various ways. This comprises the core of the Ghostrick strategy. And now we can start to really talk about where things went wrong. As we said earlier, the deck is extremely reactive, not able to make many powerful plays on its own. Your best turn 1 play is just setting a Jiangshi, which isn't amazing compared to what other decks could do on their first turn. However, one of the biggest weaknesses of Ghostricks is how reliant they are on their field spells. The ability to protect your board from attacks is kinda mandatory, given that the deck wants to be setting and flipping your Ghostricks turn after turn. However, outside of this protection effect, none of the 3 field spells have effects worth caring about. Parade's ability to add Ghostricks from deck to hand is okay, but your opponent can simply play around it by not attacking if it's really that detrimental for you to grab some more lanterns. Mansion does nothing but help you not die as quickly, which wouldn't be that big of an issue if it weren't for allowing your opponent to attack directly in the first place. Ghostrick Museum's disruption effect is okay, but it doesn't actually protect your life total or generate permanent advantage like the other 2 field spells do. Altogether, these field spells are weaker than they should be. You could put all of these effects on a single field spell, and it wouldn't be broken or anything. So having these effects split amongst 3 cards only serves to make the deck worse. On top of these cards being bad, you also need these cards at different times. Parade is great in the early game where you have tons of life points to pay for more cards. But once you've been hit a few times, something like Mansion would be better to try to keep you alive. However, you don't really have the ability to flip between different field spells whenever you want, even with cards like Terraforming. The fact that the field spells are clunky and generally underpowered makes the entire deck way more suspect. But even if you do have your field spell active, your opponent can just use spell or trap removal and get rid of your field spell, and your entire strategy falls apart. The Ghostrick strategy really doesn't want your opponent to just be able to beat over their monsters by battle, as all of the card advantage they work so hard to get will start to fall apart. There's also the fact that the deck just didn't have a real win condition. Your main way of winning the game was flipping Ghostrick Werewolf and Ghostrick Skeleton over and over, to either deal 100 damage to your opponent for each set card on the field, or banish 1 card from the top of their deck for each Ghostrick monster you control, both on hard once per turns. This was a horribly slow way to win a game back when Pac-Man was a deck before GOAT format. A build your own stealth bird is not a real win condition, even back in 2014 Yu-Gi-Oh! The real win condition was just slowly chipping your opponent to death with direct attacks, which was a lot harder than it should have been thanks to how weak the Ghostricks are in terms of attack points. The deck really would have appreciated some sort of ultimate boss monster that requires a ton of materials to summon that capped out at 3000 attack, or just so they could end the game fast once they finally managed to slow your opponent down, because otherwise you gave them a lot of draws to find a way to claw their way back into the game. Now, it's worth mentioning that Ghostricks weren't as bad as they are now when they were released. The deck was never competitive, but at the time, the other best decks around were at least closer to the power level of the Ghostrick cards. For reference, this was around the time when Dragon Rulers got released, and decks like Mermail were around at this point as well. The game was slower for sure, but decks could still have much stronger turn 1 plays at this point, often including ways to out your field spell if you didn't have meaningful interruption. However, Ghostricks are also one of the worst aged decks in the game. For one, the idea of letting your opponent attack you directly as a form of protecting your board is something that only makes sense in a game where OTKs aren't common. As the game has gone on, the ability to end the game in a single turn if your opponent doesn't do anything has only gotten more and more widespread, to the point where as the middle of the Link era, essentially every single deck could comfortably OTK your opponent. Even before this shift, damage numbers were climbing over the course of the game's history. The faster the metagame got and the more damage decks could do, the worse Ghostricks' battle-focused strategy became. This also became true for the deck's ability to disrupt your opponent. Most of the deck's interruption came from either the hand traps native to the archetype, or set back row, both of which slowly got made less and less relevant as the game went on. Players would get access to better spell and trap removal over the years, from Mystical Space Typhoon to Twin Twisters, to crazy spells like Lightning Storm in more recent years, and the ability to make a negate of some kind before the first battle phase with just a few cards would get more common as well. There was a time when using back row to stop your opponent's combos and monster effects to protect your life points was at least a reasonable strategy, but that would slowly change. And unfortunately, this playstyle is hard-coded into the way Ghostricks play thanks to the design of their cards. The deck unfortunately launched with a pretty short shelf life, and thanks to their cards only ever being okay in terms of power, the deck never had a time to shine in the TCG. The archetype only ever really saw play in one deck, a gimmicky Madolche build that played some Ghostrick cards adorably called Trick or Treat by fans. Madolche were a competent deck on their own at this time, and Ghostrick happened to have some mild synergy with the deck. You see, the Madolche can get their play started a lot easier by summoning a Madolche Mess and Gelato while they have another Madolche on the field, which lets them search out an important Madolche field spell. And this card can be special summoned from the deck thanks to MX Saber Invoker, a powerful rank 3 monster. So the deck was interested in ways to make rank 3s more consistently. A monster that can be helpful for making rank 3s is Ghostrick Jiangshi, a level 3 monster with a powerful effect when flip face up. This card can also be special summoned from your deck with Ghostrick Mary, and then search another copy of Mary to get another Jiangshi later, or find a card like Ghostrick Spectre or Jack Frost in a pinch. Essentially, the Ghostricks were a value engine that could help you make plays while also protecting yourself from more damage, which could be incredibly useful on certain board states. After this brief stint of playability in another deck, the archetype really didn't do much of anything. However, it was popular enough that Konami decided to give the cards a few ways of support. Ghostrick Renovation, Ghostrick Fairy, Ghostrick Festival, Ghost Trick or Treat, Ghostrick Shot, and Ghostrick Siren were all released from 2018 to 2022 in order to give the deck some more teeth. But none of them fix the deck's inherent issues. The most interesting of the group is probably Ghostrick Shot, though it also didn't fix the deck. This normal spell allows you to special summon a Ghostrick monster from your hand or graveyard. Then you can flip a face-down Ghostrick monster you control face up. You can also banish it from your grave to attach a Ghostrick card from your graveyard to one of your Ghostrick Xyz monsters as a material, each effect on a hard once per turn. Let's take a quick look at another card, Ghostrick Renovation, because it'll be pointed here in a second. Renovation is a normal trap that allows you to return a Ghostrick field spell from your field zone to your hand, then activate a Ghostrick field spell with a different name directly from your deck. It also allows you to banish itself from your grave to target one of your Ghostrick Xyz monsters and summon a different Ghostrick Xyz from your extra deck using it as a material, which can be used to flex between your Xyz monsters extremely easily. Each of these effects are hard once per turn, and both of these cards are quite useful for Ghostricks. Shot allowing you to extend your plays dramatically, and Renovation finally letting you have an in-archetype way to switch between your various field spells at quick effect speed. They didn't fix the deck, but they do help it keep up against the die of power creep. However, they're probably more famous for their application in non-Ghostrick combos. What you do is simply get any of the Ghostrick Xyz monsters on field, then rank them up into Angel. Then you use Angel's effect by detaching the Xyz monster that's attached to it specifically to find Shot. You use Shot to then reborn that Xyz monster from your grave. Then rank it up into another Ghostrick Angel of Mischief. Then you can rank both Angels up into a Utopic Future, and then into Utopic Draco Future for a free boss monster. This engine was used a bit and kind of popular in Master Duel, but wasn't really used anywhere else, except in Purely. In this version, you would add a Ghostrick Renovation from your deck to your hand with the second Angel of Mischief, and then use one of your quick play spells in order to discard it. After ranking into a Draco Future, you would then use any 2 level 1 monsters to make Dullahan. You rank up Dullahan into your third Angel of Mischief, then use Renovation's Graveyard effect. This would let you rank up your Ghostrick Xyz monster into a different Ghostrick Xyz. So in this case, you would go into So Cute Boss. Finally, you would use the Graveyard effect of Shot to attach the original Ghostrick Xyz you use to make the first 2 Angels to So Cute Boss. And at this point, your So Cute Boss will have as materials 2 level 1s, Dullahan, another Dullahan in Purely specifically that you use to bring out the first Angel, and an Angel of Mischief. This fulfills the requirement of E Purely Noir to allow it to rank over So Cute Boss, so that this line can allow the deck to turn any 4 level 1 monsters into Draco Future and E Purely Noir, which is a very powerful end board in addition to their normal plays. Now, there's a few things to say here. For one, this isn't all that useful for Ghostricks themselves. You could make Draco Future if you wanted to, but that takes up a lot of resources and doesn't work with the deck's playstyle. There's also the fact that this little engine is, generally, not looked at well upon by the Ghostrick community, thanks to involving very little of the deck's mascot monsters. That is, it uses absolutely 0 of them in the main deck. Still, it would be a bit wrong of us not to at least acknowledge that this combo exists, as it is one of the most impressive things the archetype has done competitively, even if only by a technicality. The rest of the support saw less competitive play, but some of them are better in Ghostricks themselves. Let's start with their new monsters, Ghostrick Fairy and Ghostrick Siren. Fairy is a level 2 spellcaster with 900 attack and 100 defense. When it's flip face up, you can target a Ghostrick card in your grave and set that card, but it's banished when it leaves the field. Then for each set card you control, you can flip an opponent's monster face down. The banishing clause isn't a huge issue in this deck, as if you use a monster as an Xyz material, it doesn't technically leave the field and won't be banished, so you can keep your monsters in rotation very easily. Unfortunately, it's not the best disruption because you can't flip your monsters whenever you want to, a flaw with many of the other Ghostricks monsters. They have to rely on things like Ghostricks Scare, which isn't the best card, so a lot of builds skip out on it. The next card is Ghostricks Siren. This is actually a level 4 fairy, the only level 4 in the archetype, and it has 800 attack and 2000 defense. In addition to the normal Ghostrick effects, it has the effect where when it's normal or flip face up, you can mill 2 cards. Then, if you send at least one Ghostrick card with this mill to the grave, you can do the following. Either add a Ghostrick spell or trap from your deck to your hand, or flip one of your opponent's effect monsters face down. This is essentially just consolidating the roles of cards like Ghostricks Stein and Ghostricks Witch into a single card, which is helpful for allowing the deck to play a more streamlined group of monsters. However, neither of these cards are really game changers for the archetype. Ghostrick Retreat is a normal trap with the effect where, if you have a face-up Ghostrick field spell or Ghostrick Link monster, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls. Then your opponent can pay 2000 life points to reset this card and stop the rest of the effect. If they don't, that monster can't attack, its effects are negated, and it's flipped face down at the end phase. This effect is a hard once per turn. This card is very cute, and it's honestly surprising it took us this long for the Halloween archetype to get a Trick or Treat card. But it's also not all that great. In 2022, when this card was released, your opponent could easily pay the 2000 life points to stop the effect, and simply use their monster without worry. And they'd probably just be able to link climb into something like Axis Code Talker to pop your entire board, and then attack for lethal. And since Axis Code Talker is a link, your hand-trapped Ghostrick monsters won't be able to save you. The final support card is also the one that's probably the best for the archetype, Ghostrick Festival. This is a 0-attack Link 1 monster that requires any non-Link Ghostrick monster. It can also use a face-down Ghostrick monster as a material for its summon, the only Link monster in the game which can do this. It also allows all of your Ghostrick monsters to attack directly as long as you have a Ghostrick field spell out. Whenever your opponent attacks, you can tribute it to special summon a Ghostrick monster from your deck in face down defense position, and this is a hard once per turn. Festival is kind of the apotheosis of Ghostrick as an archetype. It has weird rules to it, but an incredibly powerful effect. Being able to summon any archetype monster in a Link 1 would be broken in almost any other deck. However, like all Ghostricks, it's dependent on your opponent's battle phase, a restriction so bad it ended up making the card not good enough in the Link era. And that applies to all of the archetype cards as well. Now that we've seen why Ghostricks failed, it's worth talking about how the archetype could be improved upon. One obvious way to help the deck in the modern day would be to give it a card like the Hidden City from the Subterror archetype. This field spell allows you to, once per turn, flip one of your face-down Subterror monsters face up. You can do the same thing whenever an opponent declares an attack as well, giving you a quick effect way to flip your Subterror monsters, which is very important for a flip deck. As of right now, the only way Ghostricks can flip their monsters is waiting for your opponent's attack into them, or flip summoning them a turn after summoning them, or to use Ghostrick Shot exactly to flip them early. All of these use up an entire card in your hand, and that's a very recent support card anyway. This means you usually had to wait a turn to use your Jankshis at a time when most decks were able to play Stratos-esque cards with no downsides. This just isn't really necessary, even if the effect can be used multiple times over multiple turns. Considering that the deck's field spells aren't that great anyway, a new field spell with this kind of effect on top of the normal battle protection of the other field spells would be a good form of support for the archetype if they wanted to dip into this well again. In general, the archetype also could have used more powerful effects. Basically, every card in the archetype just has the normal archetype effect, and then one useful effect on top of that, which is kind of slim for modern day card design. Even the new cards they gave the archetype, Ghostricks Siren and Fairy, also have this problem despite being released years later. Part of this may come from the fact that the normal Ghostricks effects are very long to write, leaving them with very little card space left to work with. This is one of the archetypes that could have definitely benefited from archetype-specific keywords. You only need to read 1 or 2 Ghostrick cards before you know they all can't be normal summoned unless you have a Ghostrick on field, and they can put themselves face down once per turn. There's no reason to write that on every other card. And that is, in essence, why Ghostricks failed. While the deck did have some good cards, overall their cards were just incredibly clunky and slow, and the deck was weak to any form of removal. The archetype was forced to rely heavily on its field spells, which were unfortunately quite weak. Despite these downsides, the deck has a history of seeing play with other strategies as a small side engine, showing how powerful these cards can be in the right circumstances. However, the overall strategies the cards were trying to set up never quite came together thanks to the deck being very weak to removal and never being able to make plays on its own.